Nonsense Brewery.
The internet, it's a weird place.
Yeah.
Recently,
Hot take.
within the last week, a lot of big tech companies have kind of, I guess, they've banned Donald Trump from a lot of things, right? And not just
Yeah.
Donald Trump, they've banned a lot of, extremist right-wing activity from their platforms, namely Twitter, Facebook, and then those people went to that new social media app called Parler, and then Parler also got shut down by Google, Apple, Amazon even stopped hosting the website
Yeah.
using what is it, Amazon web hosting or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Shopify stores,
yeah,
not selling any more stuff. Stripe not doing any more payment processing.
right.
Um,
So do tech companies have too much power?
yeah, that's a big
Now,
question.
this is
Other,
aside from whether what they did was right or wrong. I feel like
yeah,
that kind of gets into a political conversation. And I'm sure most people who know us at this point probably know where each of us individually stand on that. But
maybe, yeah.
that doesn't necessarily matter. I just want to know from a more generic standpoint,
Yeah.
do tech companies have too much power?
Yes.
Yeah. I think we all feel
Podcast
that.
over.
Yeah, but it's more about like the subtleties of like how they go about making those decisions. It's almost like I think what the interesting thing is, it's so like from my perspective of being like somebody who codes and engineers all these things um, at different levels, right? So like I haven't worked like for a social media like company per se, but when I think about you kind of like build these solutions that like work well and scale and all that, and because you've knocked out the competition due to it most likely being like a free market, you're like, well, we provide the best service, and then there's all these considerations of like how do you create like a business worthy environment. Like what does that mean? It's like, how do I continue to be competitive, right? Like get ads up there and how do I get
Mm-hmm.
people to like want to host my my website or whatnot. And so like from my perspective, I'm just like, well, if you start changing the definition of what you're responsible for, um and then take certain decisions, I don't know. I think the interesting aspect will be, even though people call them private companies, a lot of these are publicly held in terms of
Right.
like being, so if you truly believe in like the free market, you if your investors don't like what you're doing, they'll start selling the stock, and
That's
they'll like
true.
try to get rid of it and they'll devalue it. And if you're not necessarily, yeah. So there's like, it's weird to think about, but like public shareholders are part of a very democratic process of,
Yeah.
you
And,
know
an
so,
interesting
It's
thing
not.
that I read.
but
Go
go
ahead,
ahead,
Josh.
Josh. Yeah, I'm curious. Yeah, go ahead.
It's not. It's not truly democratic, really. Well,
Yeah,
it is in a way. It's democratic
It's the
like
largest
in the
shareholder,
it in
though.
the
it's democratic
context.
like the House is democratic. It's not democratic like the Senate is democratic. Like we had a statistic the other day. It's like 50% of Americans hold like no stock whatsoever. It's like their opinion there isn't even like
Oh,
considered at all. And then
correct.
Mallory and I were talking about like I work for a Fortune 500 company, and she works for a like a not-for-profit hospital system, or like a heavily regulated hospital system where it's like so regulated almost that it's more public than private, really.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, and the point is like we're selling chemicals and plastics and polymers that are pretty low stakes, and there's not a lot of ethical questions. I mean, there is like climate and like shareholder opinions and stuff, but like
Yeah,
they're like our commodity is plastic and her commodity is human lives. So it's like a
absolutely.
very, very different equation.
Yeah, and I guess just to clarify, what I meant by democratic, I didn't mean within the representation of Americans and their. I meant more of just in the fact that there's multiple um, individual capability to like to put in their voice. But I agree, it's like
Yeah.
the entry ticket is being able to afford a share, right?
Right.
Like
The
it's
and the
not just
difference,
existing because you are a human being, which is what our
right?
American republic is about. So
So that was one qualification I was making, and then the other was the
yeah,
ethical piece, where shareholder decisions are very much based on bottom lines and like profits and metrics, like financial metrics. Whereas like ethics, like shareholders would probably want insulin to stay at $700. Like type 2 diabetic paid $700 a month for the same insulin that costs $3 a month in Canada. But that's not an ethical consideration at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then I guess where I was going to ask you all is, because there is the option of shareholders to kind of hold some power over the price of it, if let's say enough people own the shares and then ethically ask themselves, well, we don't want companies to get as involved into those kind of decisions, do you think like they kind of have like some ethical approach to these companies, right? Like if people really didn't like, the people who own Amazon or whatever didn't like what they did today because it was symbolic of, to what extent do they,
So,
have
I
a
think
certain, yeah.
I
Do you see
think
what I'm
there
trying to ask?
is, yeah, I think there is an extent, because so the interesting thing is, like, all companies, all public companies, the number one thing they care about is their shareholders, right? Giving their shareholders value. And so the interesting thing is, like, a company like Twitter that's trading at about $45 or whatever, so really low barrier to entry, let's call it. They went down almost 12% yesterday. I think they rebounded a little bit and closed a little higher, but they went down 12%. And the interesting thing I was reading was a lot of people that sold Twitter completely for no financial reasons, just because they didn't agree with what the company said or did, and they just didn't want it in their portfolio anymore. Now,
Right.
you take a company like Amazon that's got, what's their stock trading at right now? Like 2,700. So really high barrier to entry.
Yeah.
Someone that's holding Amazon stock, I would think it would be very difficult to make that like emotional decision of, oh, I don't like what Amazon did, I'm going to sell them, because it's so expensive, right? And because it's still growing at such a rapid rate, and you can expect it to hit 3,000 in the next couple months or whatever. You can
Sure.
expect it
Yeah.
to grow. So I don't know. I think there is a limit to where people draw the line between ethics or their morals, I guess, and financial gain.
Yeah.
I actually watched a video about this like the other day. It was about ethical investing. And apparently they have like ETFs set up that meet like certain criteria that you can invest towards. They like don't
Mm-hmm.
fund carbon producing companies. You can get one like that, or
Oh
like
yeah, I've
one
heard of
that's
these.
good
How do they
to
not fund
animals.
carbon producing? Like, are you
That's
saying
not
net
really.
zero?
Yeah, like they only include net zero companies in the
Okay, that makes
portfolio.
sense.
Something you can pick any sort of like moral quandary you might have, and they'll have an ETF that can kind of cater towards that need or towards your moral objection. So it's
That
Something
is
else I would say
interesting.
is, I mean, the people with the most money in this system are making the most, or like the most dramatic or the most important decisions, right?
Yeah.
And personally, I think there's, I don't know, something, not completely, but something inherently unethical about being a billionaire, in my opinion. Just, I don't think you can create that much value. Like, you can have an idea, but then how much is that idea worth? Is that idea worth 200 and whatever $1 billion? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it's, where do you draw the line, right?
When other
Because at a certain
people
point, you're
starving.
just making so much money that you literally like can't spend it. You're just hoarding money at that point, right? So it's like,
It's
what do
the
you do?
means of production. It's kind of like I mean, that's a big thing that like socialists and communists talk about,
Mm-hmm.
is seizing the means of production. But that's kind of what they, I mean, that's not like Uber, for example. I don't think it's a revolutionary idea to take cabs. I'm poking in my screen here. I don't think
Yeah.
it's a revolutionary idea to take a cab company, and then just say those people aren't employees anymore, so we don't have to give them full-time benefits,
Yeah.
and just have drivers that it's like a sweatshop that they made. They just built an app for it. So I don't know.
Right.
There's a ton of questions.
It's a tricky
It's a slippery
line,
slope.
because I agree with that, Josh. It's
It's
almost like,
it's also hard for lawmakers, I feel like, to regulate things like the internet, because they don't understand it. Just like,
Yeah.
just like we can, sit here and talk about what we think these companies are trying to do. And, ultimately, like, we didn't build the internet. We don't understand how it works. Like, I've never made an app. And more so, like, these lawmakers that are, 60 plus years old, they're all sitting in Washington, like, they grew up in their childhood when the internet wasn't even around. They surely don't understand how it works. And it's like, how do you regulate something that you really don't understand what it is?
I don't think you can. And I think going back to the original question of like, do tech companies have too much power? I think it's also tricky because it's like a new kind of power.
Mm-hmm.
It's like all of human history, power was like, I'm a king and you do what I say or I kill
Right.
you. Exactly, Josh. But this is more like of an insidious kind of power. It's not as direct.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Are you gonna sing everything I say now? All right,
It's
good.
almost, yeah, it's
Oh my
almost
God.
definitely at the whims of who has it, and right, and like we'd like to think that whoever leads these companies or our government is as enlightened. They're complete human beings and they have the right wisdom and intelligence. But at the end of the day, we're all people. So one day somebody could get a bright idea that's a very bad idea, right?
Yeah.
And not saying that what has occurred are necessarily bad ideas, but like, it's like one of those things it when you can say it, like when you see it, right? It's not like
Right.
something you can like write down. So I think, yeah, that is the question. It's like, when I brought up like the stocks, is that a check and balance enough for those companies, right? Or do the people who buy stuff from Amazon also, that's where like people get into like whether the market can really regulate itself, right? Or does the government step in and all that? So it's definitely stuff to,
Sometimes I wonder what would Jesus Christ think about all this going on in our world now.
I mean, I would say people don't really like love each other that much. I'll say that.
Let's
you know.
ponder that
No, just
while we go to break.
Buddha would
Thank
probably
you.
think that
Thank
too,
you,
bro.
Dan.
wait, I have one more thought kind of related. I think I'm being such a head ass.
You are.
You're a
I
net.
was gonna say no. This should actually be a law. If I was president, I would make it a law. Everyone in someone's district, whether it's your like member in in the House or member of Congress, like the Senate, everyone should get to vote, and you get one vote per person in your district, and it should be what book that person has to read that month.
Wait.
And that's it. We've got a break now.
I see what he's saying. He's saying vote for the book that your
Everyone, yeah.
representatives have to read.
That the rep
You-
has to read.
You have to tell your representative how to get educated. I think that's what he's getting at, kind of.
Yep.
Oh.
But then you'd have like trolls, like be like Franklin the Turtle.
Hey,
Yeah.
there are some
Yeah,
valuable
but-
lessons in Franklin the Turtle.